Hey besties, welcome back to Besties and Books. Today, oh my gosh, we are diving into Taming 7 by Chloe Walsh, which is book 5 in the Boys of Tommen series, and we are not holding back.
Yep, this is your full spoiler reading vlog. So consider this your warning. If you haven't read Taming 7 yet, pause the video, grab the book, emotionally prepare yourself, and then come right back.
This book, it has wrecked us. We laughed, we cried, we stress texted each other, honestly, the whole spectrum.
And in this vlog, you are getting our real-time reactions. The gasps, the theories, the heartbreak, the screaming, the, oh my God, he did not just say that, all of it.
Plus, we're talking character arcs, favourite scenes, the moments that destroyed us, and all the chaos that makes the series completely addictive.
So grab a snack, settle in, and let's get into Taming 7 because we have a lot to unpack.
Don't forget though, if you're loving our content, to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so you don't miss any of our future videos. And with that being said, let's get into it. Hey besties, we are back with another full spoiler reading vlog of Taming 7 by Chloe Walsh. This is book 5 in the Boys of Tommen series. I am so excited to be back with the Boys of Tommen characters. This book follows Gibsie and Claire, one of our favourite side characters from books 1 to 4. I would even say predominantly books 1 to 2, where we see Gibsie and Claire the most. We only got a couple cameos in books 3 and 4. Anyway, I have to apologise in advance. I have come down with a flu, so I sound super nasally. Bear with me. The other thing is I am very much in the 3rd trimester now of pregnancy, so I am super out of breath and short of breath. So if you hear me huffing and puffing, I am doing my absolute best. Also, before we get into my first check-in for this book, I am filming from Queenstown, New Zealand. We are on our family holiday, and oh my gosh, it is so stunning here. It is so beautiful. There is still snow on the mountains, even though we're technically here in spring. We are just absolutely loving it. I'll see if I can show you. Hang on. So that was the view from one of our bedrooms. It is like that in every single room. I wish I could show you the balcony that overlooks the mountains with the fireplace. It is stunning, absolutely stunning. But I can't show you right now because there is a bit of construction going on next door, which is quite noisy, and also the kids are downstairs and they'll probably be like, Mummy, what are you doing? What are you doing? Can I come on camera? Anyway, so I digress. I'm about 15% of the way through the book. I'm already loving it. I have just finished a fantasy book as well, book 3, in a series that Sarah is currently reading, so that'll be in our monthly reading wrap up. But it just didn't hit for me like I wanted it to. And so I really wanted to get back into a series that I knew I loved and sort of a predicted 4 to 5 star read, because I think I'm in a bit of a fantasy slump, to be honest. I've just read so many sort of average fantasies, not bad fantasies, but just average ones, fantasy and romantasies. I'm just hanging on for something. I just really want a fantasy or romantasy to wow me, and I just haven't really had that lately. Although Brimstone, book 2 to Quicksilver by Kelly Hart, is coming out very soon. So I am hoping that hits and is just as good as book 1, because we totally love that. I have gone totally off tangent again. Let's get back to this check-in that I was trying to do. So 15% of the way through, I am loving it. I didn't realise how close Claire and Gibsie are. Like, we sort of knew that they were friends from childhood, but he literally stays at her house every single night when he has night terrors about what happened to his father and his sister in an accidental drowning incident, which he sort of alluded to he blames himself for a little bit. So I've heard mixed reviews about this book. A lot of people have said that Gibbsie's sense of humour is really lacking in this book. It focuses more on his darker side, and it's almost like the humour is cut out altogether, whereas he was really like the comedic relief in book 1. Yeah, and I think just for some people it didn't quite hit. But so far, I don't know, I'm loving it. I'm seeing the humour there. He's still cracking the jokes, but we're still seeing that darker side as well. I think the author is balancing it so well so far, even though I'm only 15% of the way through, between his tragic sort of past and also his sense of humour and that comedic relief to the book. I think so far we're seeing both sides, so I have no complaints. What I also love and appreciate is that it hasn't gone back in time like we saw with books 3 and 4 with Boys of Tommen. So this is basically started off where Redeeming 6 finishes. There is a prologue of Gibsie and Claire as 5-year-olds around the time of Gibsie's father's and sister's funeral. So we got a bit of back story there, and as soon as I read the prologue, I was like, oh, are we going to go back in the timeline all over again? Not that that was necessarily a bad thing for book 3 and 4, but I was getting a bit tired of it. But no, I was very happily surprised. So after the prologue, we got straight into the current timeline where Redeeming 6 finishes and where Gibsie and Claire's relationship is at that point in time. So I love that, and we get to see a little bit of Joey and Aoife and their son AJ already as well, and Johnny and Shannon are already making cameos. So I'm loving where this book is starting off. It also seems like Gibsie has a really hard time with his stepfather and his stepbrother, Mark. Although we haven't really been introduced to Mark yet, we have been introduced to the stepfather, Keith. He's not abusive or anything, but he's very belittling and degrading towards Gibsie and sort of seems to talk about a lot of Gibbsie's almost like failures, even though they're not really failures. He's obviously got strengths in other aspects of his life, but Keith seems to make it out like Gibsie is totally failing at life compared to Keith's son Mark, which is Gibbsie's stepbrother. So there's a bit going on there, and then we've got the tragic past of what happened to Gibsie's father and sister in this accidental drowning that occurred when Gibsie was around, I think he was around 6 years old, and Claire was about 5. So already at 15% in, I am gripped. I'm super excited to see where the story goes. And I will check in again with you around that 50% mark. And hopefully I am still totally loving it.
Hi, besties. It is a new month, which means a new vlog. Now, for this month, we are continuing with the Boys of Tommen series by Chloe Walsh. We have done a vlog of books 1 to 4, and we are on to book 5, which is called Taming 7. So in this book, we are following Gibbs and Claire. We know them very well already from books 1 to 4. Gibbs is a best friend of Johnny's, and Claire is best friends with Shannon. So we're very familiar with them. We already love them. Gibbs is fairly hilarious in books 1 to 4. So I was initially thinking that this would be quite a different feel to the other books. It would be much more lighthearted. I think I'm wrong. I am 25% through, and we are certainly seeing a side to Gibbs that is not shown in books 1 to 4. It being a Chloe Walsh book, there already is a very heavy emotional element. The book starts when Claire is 5 years old, Gibbs is 7 years old, and they're at the funeral. Gibbs's dad and sister have passed away in a very tragic drowning incident. Gibbs and Claire, they're already best friends. She doesn't really understand what is happening at the funeral. She just feels very happy that Gibbs is okay when, even though she knows, or she, as a 5-year-old, she sort of knows that the dad and the sister are in these boxes at the front of the church, but doesn't really understand what is happening. But her and Gibbs already have this very sweet relationship. He ends up falling asleep that night holding her hand, and that so seemingly continues for the next 10 years, because we fast forward 10 years. Gibbs has got some serious trauma related to the drowning of his dad and his sister. He doesn't sleep well unless he's sleeping over at Claire's house. Their relationship so far is purely friends, although it's very clear that they both feel very strongly for each other. Their relationship has not progressed into, I guess, romance. We are also starting to get an insight into Claire's friend Lizzie. So Claire does bump into her at the pool one day, and Lizzie, it's quite obvious that Lizzie has been self-harming. She's been cutting herself, and we learn that that's not a new thing. That's happened in the past. We do know from previous books that her sister committed suicide, And we learn in book 5 that she seems to blame Gibbs in part because it's Gibbs's brother-in-law had some attachment to Lizzie's sister, and obviously that did not end well and may have led to or encouraged her suicide. So Lizzie has some serious grudge against Gibbs. I think the next Boys of Tom and book will actually focus on Lizzie, so we'll find out her full story then, but already we're getting a lot more insight into her life. The kids are all about to start back at Tommen. They spend one final day at the beach to enjoy the nice weather. Lizzie is there, so it does sort of descend into a bit of tension and angst in the pack, and I think that's going to continue. But so far, I am enjoying it. I'm not sure there's a Chloe Walsh book that I would not enjoy, so I'm very keen to read how Claire and Gibbs' story evolves.
Hey besties, I'm here with my second check-in for Taming 7. So I'm about 50% of the way through the book. Again, I have to apologise. I'm still sick, so I'm sounding very nasally. Bear with me, I'm doing my best. So I'm still loving the book. We're learning more and more about Gibsie and Claire's dynamic, Gibbsie's background, especially involving the death of his sister and his father, and how he really blames himself for that because he apparently was playing some sort of game with his sister when they were really little. She fell in the water. He jumped in after her even though he couldn't swim, and his dad was forced to jump in after them to try and save them both. And in the process of his dad trying to save them both, his dad ends up drowning and his sister ends up drowning as well. Super tragic. Obviously, not something you could ever blame a child for. Why the kids weren't wearing life jackets, circumstances around that, I don't know. We're not really given any much more information other than Gibsie just blames himself. There's also a big focus on Lizzie in this story, so maybe the next book is going to be about Lizzie. I haven't looked ahead to see what the next book is or who the next book follows, but this book seems to be setting up for her story, and basically in this book Lizzie is a total bitch. She is awful. So awful to Gibsie, blames him for her sister's death, even though it was his stepbrother, Mark, apparently had some sort of involvement. We don't really know what has happened yet. There's accusations of rape, but it seems like there's two sides to the story. And again, I think if Lizzie gets her own book, it'll really delve deep into what happened with Lizzie's sister and what happened with Mark, which is Gibbsie's stepbrother. But he seems pretty icky at this point, from what we've heard. So Gibbsie's humour still is there for me. I'm still giggling, I'm still laughing. Probably not as much as in books 1 and 2, where we were following Johnny and Shannon, but his humour is still there for me, which I'm surprised about because a lot of the reviews that I read or listened to said that it really focused on the darker elements of Gibbsie's life rather than, and his humour sort of fell short a lot, which a lot of people I think were expecting just something a bit more lighthearted this time. But if we know Chloe Walsh, all of her books so far have been, pretty dark. In saying that, this book so far definitely doesn't have the high stakes that books 1 to 4 have. So like with books 1 and 2, you're following the Lynch family dynamic, and that's super dark, and we learn more and more about the abuse from the hands of the father and even the mental abuse from the mother, and how that all unfolded and ended just sort of had you gripped in at the edge of your seat. And then books 3 and 4 where you're following Joey and Aoife when Joey's going through his drug problem and that whole spiral and wanting to get him out of it and being super gripped and invested in his story and redeeming himself, whereas this book doesn't really have that. It's more Gibbsie's tragic past, but it's missing that sort of high stake element, which is fine. That's not to say I'm not enjoying it. I am really enjoying it. I'm loving it, but that's probably the main thing that's missing from this book compared to books 1 to 4 that we've already read. Also, at this point in time, Lizzie and Claire's relationship seems to be crumbling. They're fighting a lot. Lizzie is just at Gibsie, at him. She is relentless and she is awful to all of her friends, and it sounds like they have stuck by her for years, trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, knowing that she's a good person inside and not letting her nasty comments get to them. But she is just... in terms of pushing people away, I am like, is that what you're trying to do? Are you trying to get rid of all your friends? Are you literally trying to, she must be filled with that much self-loathing that she is just projecting onto everybody else. And it's really awful to read. But if the next book is about Lizzie, I'm actually really keen to hear her story, and I hope that she has some sort of redemption arc. The other element of the story is Dee, which is the school administrator, and sort of Johnny not pulling her up, but just mentioning to Gibsie, oh, we think Dee is grooming you or has been grooming you. And I'm like, of course she has. I don't care if she's 24 and he's 17. He has been groomed, and Johnny is totally right. It is statutory rape if you're under 16, which Gibsie was at the time that this all started. And I want to see something happen with Dee. I want to see her get caught out, and I want to see her held accountable, because you cannot do this to school-aged children. It is actually sickening. Totally, totally sickening. Like, if I found out that my kids were going to school and their school administrator or teacher was grooming them or abusing them, oh man, I'd want them in prison for the rest of their lives. The other thing that's happened back to Lizzie and Claire's relationship is Lizzie didn't tell Claire or anyone that her parents had split up and that Lizzie's father had moved out, and that came as a real shock to Claire and I think the friendship group. And oh my gosh, it just made me think, this girl really feels like, oh, she just must hate herself. Like, she's obviously so depressed, in this spiral of self-loathing. She is just like she's just in self-destructive mode. I don't know how else to put it. She clearly loves her friends, because while she's sort of pushing them away with all these nasty comments, she still comes back to them and tries to be a part of the group and participates in extracurricular activities with them, tries to set Claire up, even though she's pushing a guy on Claire that is just so wrong, but it's purely out of getting Claire away from Gibsie. I just feel like she doesn't actually want to push her friends away. She just hates herself so much at the moment, and she cannot figure out how to pull herself out of it, all following her sister's death. So anyway, that's where I'm up to right now. I'm absolutely loving it. Not as high stakes as book 1 to 4, but I think this still has the potential to be a 4 to 5 star read, depending on where it goes. And I will check in again, probably around the 70 to 75% mark.
Hi besties, time for my second check-in for Taming 7, our latest vlog book by Chloe Walsh. It's fair to say that Claire and Gibbs are both very confused at this point. I'm about halfway through the book. Claire particularly really does not know where she stands with Gibbs. He tells her that he loves her, but he always has told her that he loves her. And she says the same back at him. But so far it's all very platonic. It hasn't yet gone into anything romantic. Gibbs's friends have all told him that he needs to make up his mind. They tell him that she has been in love with him since she was a young girl, and Gibbs is not being fair on her. He needs to make up his mind. Does he want to be with her or not? And if he doesn't want to be with her, he needs to move aside and let her get on with her life. Claire has basically said the same thing herself to Gibbs, and yet he still just can't get out of that friendship zone. They are 100%, these two, there for each other. So Gibbs has definitely a very up and down personality. So the jovial, happy-go-lucky boy that we know from books 1 to 4, there's absolutely a serious side to him, and he does have some real lows. And every time he does, Claire is there for him. And one particular scene that I love, Claire goes over to Gibbs's house, and she can tell just by the music he's playing that he is not in a good mood. She goes into his bedroom, and he has decided to paint a huge yellow smiley face on his ceiling that looks pretty horrible. And his attitude is sort of over the top happy, but Claire knows he's not in a good way. So she ends up getting on his shoulders and painting next to his smiley face, she paints a second smiley face and she says to Gibbs, I don't want your smiley face to be alone. So she really does sort of meet him where he's at in a very, very sweet way and does all she can to help him. Now, another sort of side story that we're seeing a lot of is the relationship between Lizzie and Gibbs. So Gibbs calls Lizzie the Viper and she calls him Thor, and they have had it multiple occasions, just back and forth, like verbal spats. She seems to hate his guts, and she more often than not will start it, but they will just hurl insults back and forth. It even got the latest scene, I think she told Gibbs that the wrong sibling survived the drowning, basically saying that Gibbs should have drowned instead of his sister. So it does get very emotional and very heated between them. And Claire is stuck in the middle with one of her best friends and sort of her best long-term guy friend, and she doesn't know what to do. And I think this is going to probably get worse before it gets better. That's it for now. I'll keep reading and I'll check in about 75%.
Hey besties, I am back again with another check-in. Oh my god, I just had to talk about it. So I'm about 70% of the way through the book. Gibsie and Claire have kissed and done a bit more than that, but he has sort of relinquished this ridiculous notion that he can't be with Claire and these fears that were sort of driving me insane because he just couldn't put words to why he was so scared to be with Claire. But he's finally said it's because he doesn't want to, I guess, ruin what they have, which I can appreciate because they've been best friends since childhood. It was sort of obvious, right, that was his fear, but he's finally put words to it. They've kissed. But I'm at a point now where Huey had an 18th Halloween party at their house and Gibsie got really drunk, ends up in biddies, and who turns up but Dee? And I was like, oh my god, no. And she climbs into his lap and I'm like, no, please Claire, don't walk in. And she didn't, and he left biddies after telling her to basically get lost and that he belongs with Claire. But it's just come out now that Gibsie and Dee were spotted, and it just so happens that a picture was taken by girls at the school where Dee is in Gibbsie's lap before he tells her to basically get lost, and they show it to Claire. Oh my god, it just has me so stressed out. I just because they've just made all this progress, they've finally kissed, they've finally acknowledged that they're sort of going to be together, and then this has happened and it just sets them back another 5 steps. So I've literally just found this out and thought I have to check in with you guys, and I am dreading the conversation that's going to happen with Gibsie and Claire, if it's going to happen at all, if she's going to ignore him, or is there going to be a communication barrier there? It's just... oh, it's so stressful. Meanwhile, at Huey's party as well, Mark shows up because someone called Gibbsie's mother to collect Gibsie. Gibbsie's mum asked Keith, the stepfather, to get him. Keith asked Mark, the stepbrother, to get Gibsie. Shows up at Huey's house. Huey loses it. He hates Mark, loathes Mark for what happened to Lizzie's sister. As I mentioned before, Hugh and Lizzie sort of have this side relationship. They used to be together. They're not anymore, but Huey has some very strong feelings about what happened to Lizzie's sister when she committed suicide and Mark's involvement in that. So Huey loses it at the party, gets in a fight with Mark. Mark ends up, I think, shoving about 3 of them, one of which is Lizzie. So she starts screaming because Mark's got his hands on her after the accused rape of Lizzie's sister. So that was super intense. And I was like, oh my God. You know, talk about high stakes that I was mentioning before, but there still isn't, you know, super high stakes between Gibsie and Claire yet. That was more Lizzie's side of things. Anyway, I digress. I was going to say in this check-in that I was getting a bit tiresome of Gibsie and Claire's miscommunication. You know, Gibsie just going on and on and on about how he can't be with Claire, but that's all resolved now, thankfully. I was a bit over it at that point. Oh my gosh, and I didn't mention, so Mark has sort of showed back up at Gibsie's house. So when I did my last check-in, Mark wasn't in town. He was sort of the stepbrother that we'd heard about, but he wasn't in Ballylagan, and he's just sort of showed up and sort of alluded to that he might be moving back to Ballylagan with his wife and son. So that's the whole reason why Mark's there. It adds a whole another layer of drama, which I'm sure we'll see if Lizzie gets her own book, which I highly suspect now at this point that the next book is going to be about Lizzie. This whole book has been setting it up basically for her story. So I feel like that's coming. But yes, Mark is back in Ballylagan and adding a whole nother level of drama. So anyway, that's where I'm at right now. So literally Claire has just seen this photograph of Gibsie and Dee, although she doesn't know it's Dee because Dee is in a Catwoman costume for Halloween. But either way, there is obviously a girl sitting on Gibsie's lap at Biddy's right after they have just kissed and basically confessed their love for each other. So shit is about to go down. All right, besties, that's all from me. I will check in again when I've finished Taming 7.
Hey besties, time for my next check-in for Taming 7. I am about 75% through the book. Things are really picking up. While I enjoyed the first 50%, I did find there were some moments that lagged a little bit. But somewhere between the 50 and the 75% mark, this book has just sort of escalated in terms of the pace and the tensity. It is crazy. So in terms of Gibbs and Claire, their relationship, sort of at the 50% mark, they've started to straddle that line between friendship and something more. But of course, Gibbs is freaking out every time sort of it progresses to the next step. He runs away, he freaks out, he sort of shuts down a little bit. And Claire is left wondering, what the hell am I supposed to do? She's getting a lot of pressure from Lizzie to go on a date with somebody else. So she does, give Gibbs the chance. She tells him that she's going to go on a date with another guy. He basically calls her bluff and says, go for it. You do you, don't wait for me sort of vibe. She does go on the date. It's not great. He's not Gibbs. And Gibbs, meanwhile, is running off to Johnny and freaking out that she's on dates with other guys. So fast forward to sort of the 75% mark. There's been a bit of confusion between the two of them. There's some romantic scenes out in the rain. And at the end of the day, Gibbs asks Claire to be his girlfriend, which is very sweet. So things are going well on that front. In terms of Lizzie, she really is not a nice person. Now, I know she's in a lot of pain. And we will, I think in the next book, find out a lot more about her character and her perspective, and I'm sure we will come to love her. But at the moment, she's just a real bitch. So she is just relentless in her hatred, and every chance she gets, she makes digs at Gibbs. She is not nice, and that's causing a lot of strain between her and Claire. It didn't help that Claire went to Lizzie's mum and told Lizzie's mum that Lizzie had been cutting herself again, and Lizzie's mum completely freaked out. Lizzie lost it at Claire. Claire regretted doing it, but yes, hasn't helped their relationship at all. Now, the other huge news is that Mark has come back to Ballylagan. So Mark is Gibbs's stepbrother. He's been away for many years. At the 50% mark, we don't know so much about Mark's backstory, except that he has a reputation for being a bully. There are also rumours circulating that he raped Lizzie's sister and that led her to commit suicide. Lizzie is very, very adamant and will tell anyone that will listen that Mark is a rapist. So Mark is back. There have been a few sort of confrontations between Mark and Hugh. Hugh came over at one point. Hugh has got a bit of a soft spot for Lizzie. He came over at one point and slammed Mark against the wall and said, stay away from her. At Hugh's 18th, he also got into a physical fight with Mark. So things have not resolved yet. We're going to see a lot more of Mark. And I literally have just read, and I'm in a little bit of shock actually, just read sort of at the 75% mark, Gibbs has confronted Mark and basically said, you have to leave town or I am going to tell everyone the truth about your past. And the truth is that Mark was raping Gibbs for 4 years when he was a kid. And it's just very full on. I think the last 25 of the books is going to be very emotional and very full on, but I haven't read any further than that, and I'm in shock and I need a few minutes to process it.
Hey besties, I am back with a final check-in. I have finished Taming 7 by Chloe Walsh. Oh my gosh, what a finale to Taming 7. I was literally just saying in the last check-in that this book doesn't have the high stakes that books 1 to 4 have, but literally as I just did the check-in, I read a little bit more. We learned that Mark was raping Gibsie for over 4 years when Gibsie was a child. Holy fuck. That was a huge revelation. We always thought it was Lizzie's sister who was raped by Mark and then not believed, but this whole time it's been Gibsie and he has just copped it for years and years and years. All the verbal abuse and tirade from Lizzie about Mark and his sister and being related when it was Gibsie the entire time that was being raped and sexually abused. And to top it all off, Cammy was Gibbsie's babysitter. Gibsie confessed what was happening with Mark, his stepbrother, to Lizzie's sister and basically made a cry out for help, and he wasn't believed. Lizzie's sister dismissed it until like a year later, she walked in on Mark literally raping Gibsie in the bedroom. And Mark and Lizzie's sister were dating at the time. Ugh. Horrific. So it's sort of alluded to that Lizzie's sister actually committed suicide in relation to that. It wasn't because she was raped by Mark, it's because of what happened to Gibsie and how she didn't believe him and ignored him about it and then walked in on it over a year later and was just horrified, obviously. So really, really dark, horrific things have happened to Gibsie that we had no idea about because he's been such a comic relief through all of the books so far. And that was just so shocking and gripping. And literally from the point that this was revealed after my last check-in, I just couldn't put it down, and I finished it the same night at like midnight or something. So then after all of this happened, Claire thought she was picking up tickets for the ball and picked up this little folded note from Lizzie's sister. It was the real suicide note that she wrote to Gibsie, and it had to do with everything that had happened and how she wrote in, I guess, a confession in there so that Mark could get taken away by the guards. Anyway, so Claire discovers this note by accident. She reads it and obviously totally breaks down, but reveals it in the worst possible way. She sort of gets into an argument with Lizzie and in front of everyone screams at Lizzie saying it was never your sister, it was Gibsie that was raped and abused all these years by Mark. You have just verbally assaulted him again and again and again when Gibsie had nothing to do with it and he was the victim and not Lizzie, but it was in front of everyone. So it just came out in a really, really awful way. People were drunk and Claire, rightfully so, doesn't regret that it came out, just regret that it came out in the way that it did, and explains that to Gibsie later on. But wow, what a revelation and such a tense moment. I was just like, oh my god, what is happening? Meanwhile, before all of this unfolded, Gibsie had only just confessed to Claire that Dee, the school administrator, he sort of had been with her in the past but hadn't gone all the way, and Claire flips out about that, makes Dee resign on the spot, threatens to go to the guards, but Gibsie keeps standing by his choice that he doesn't want to pursue charges against Dee because she was what he needed at the time. So that's sort of left open, I guess. Although the issue that I have with this is Dee can still go on and do the same thing to other kids at school. So it doesn't prevent her from hitting on other teenage boys if she gets another job at a school or wherever, really. So she still has that ability to abuse that power. So I understand that Gibbs doesn't want to persecute her for himself, but at least for future kids and teenage boys, he really, really should. So anyway, we'll see what happens there. It might be unveiled a bit more in the next book, which I did have a little quick squiz this morning. It is definitely about Lizzie, which I highly suspected. So we will be doing a full spoiler reading vlog for the next book as well, which tells Lizzie's story. But I digress. So after Claire makes the big reveal in front of everybody about all the abuse that Gibsie has copped over the years from his stepbrother Mark, she gets in a verbal altercation with Lizzie. Lizzie doesn't believe her. She says that she's still siding with Gibsie and he's making it all up and it's not true and there's no note from her sister and she has the real suicide note and knows what happened and blah, blah, blah. And Claire just unleashes. She's like, your sister was an accomplice to Mark. She knew what was going on. She didn't believe him. She denied it. And basically this friendship is over. I am done with you, Lizzie. I'm moving on with my life. I understand that you've been through a lot, but I cannot take the verbal tirade from you anymore. And I will not take it on behalf of Gibsie. I'm choosing him over you. And oh my gosh, it is just such a heartbreaking, heart-wrenching moment, but it needed to happen, right? You can't let your friends treat you that way no matter what they've been through. They need to deal with their trauma in a healthy way and just get help to do that. No one is expected to deal with their trauma on their own. In fact, it is really difficult for someone to deal with any sort of trauma on their own. You need your close group of friends. You need professional help. But at the same time, what Lizzie has been doing and unleashing on every single person around her, especially Gibsie, is just so toxic and unhealthy for them that Claire needed to stand her ground, set some boundaries, and sever that friendship, essentially, unless Lizzie turns things around and gets some professional help. On a lighter note, when Gibsie and Claire they have sex for the first time, and it's Gibsie's first time and Claire's first time, there is a hilarious moment where Gibsie runs into like a beam on the treehouse and knocks himself out, and Claire is like hysterical. She's like, I killed Gibsie with my hymen to the parents. It's a very funny, very cringe-worthy scene, but much needed comic relief with a lot of these dark moments. So yes, the book ended up being very dark. A lot of triggering topics were discussed, but I was totally gripped. I really loved it. And with that being said, my star rating is 4.5 stars. I was leaning towards a 4-star, and then with that ending, it definitely bumped it up to 4.5. Not quite a 5-star for me. It was just lacking a bit of the high stakes from the beginning, whereas we sort of had that in books 1 to 4 from the very start, so you were always gripped, always on edge, whereas this book focused more on Claire and Gibsie's sort of relationship and getting through their communication issues and sort of taking that next step from friendship to romantic relationship. And then the high stakes were really introduced from 80% of the book onwards, so that's why it was just slightly less for me, but I still loved it. Totally loved it. Cannot believe we only have one book to go until this series is complete. Although I do believe there are more books to come, but we just haven't had any updates on publication or anything like that. And I don't think we know yet who will follow. But for now, there is only one book to go. And I've heard it is an absolute heart-wrencher, emotional ride. That is Lizzie's story. Every vlog that I've seen, people are bawling their eyes out. It's put them in a reading slump for the rest of the year and in a really dark place. So I'm just like, what more can Chloe Walsh do? But I'm actually really keen to get to it. We'll probably get to it over the Christmas break, we'll see. But watch this space for our next reading vlog. Stick around because Sarah will be giving her final thoughts right after this clip.
Hey besties, final check-in for Taming 7. I have finished the book and whoa, the last 25% just hit me. I am surprised by how much I got sucked into, particularly the last sort of 30% of the book. So Gibbs and Claire are 100% together. There was a brief hiccup where Claire saw a photo of Gibbs with the school receptionist, and that sort of caused a bit of tension for a little bit, but they resolved that. They've moved on. There is a very hilarious scene where after Gibbs and Claire do the deed for the first time, and Gibbs cannot handle blood, so he passes out, and then there's a very funny scene where she runs to her parents basically saying that I killed Gibbs with my hymen. It's classic. Claire does find out at some point that the school receptionist was taking advantage or was grooming Gibbs when he was as young as 15 years old, and Claire goes mental. She storms in there to speak to the receptionist, basically calls her a pervert, says she's going to call the cops on her. She is out for blood. Gibbs is asking Claire to calm down and not get too carried away, but Claire won't relent, and she says she won't go to the police as long as the receptionist quits, which she does. So Claire is all fired up on behalf of Gibbs. Then they head to the school ball, and Claire finds a letter that Gibbs has kept for many years, and the letter is from Lizzie's sister, who used to be Gibbs's babysitter. And she, in the letter, apologizes to Gibbs for not believing Gibbs when he told her that he was being raped by Mark. Whew, full on. And the letter is sort of Lizzie's sister's confession. It's also her testimony, and she says, take this to your parents, take it to the police, and he's going to get what's coming to him. Now, Claire finds it, she reads it at the school ball, and she is an absolute mess. She's really struggling to hold it together, to get through the ball, to then talk to Gibbs about it later. He can obviously sense that something is not right. So the two of them go into a side room at the school where the ball is being held. Eventually they are joined by all of the rest of their friends. Johnny's there, Shannon's there, Hugh and Lizzie come in, everyone's there. Of course, it descends into the usual Lizzie having an absolute go at Gibbs, and Claire cannot handle it. She is just 100% in Gibbs's corner. This poor guy, he was abused for years as a kid. He's held it together. He tries to, not respond to all of Lizzie's jibes, and she loses it at Lizzie. And it comes out, when she's losing it, it does come out that Gibbs was raped for 4 years by Mark. Now, Lizzie, everyone is in uproar. Lizzie doesn't believe it. Gibbs is shocked that Claire knows and just told everyone. So Gibbs runs away. Johnny's running after him. Claire's running after him. It's chaos. No one knows what's going on or what the truth is. Lizzie's in a state. So it all comes out, and all the parents find out about it. The police get involved. It is sort of just chaos. Gibbs does withdraw into his shell for a while, and he's got Johnny there. He's got so much good support around him, but it's full on. It's emotional. It is tense. Obviously, he's got a bit of a journey ahead of him in terms of processing and dealing as to his friends and his family. But the book does end on a note where, Gibbs and Claire are together. They're going to, see this journey of their relationship through, and they're going to work through things. And so it does have a sort of a positive, hopeful ending. I am super keen for the next book because I think it's going to be focused on Lizzie and presumably Mark, who he hasn't been caught by the police by the end of this book. So I think he will focus strongly in the next book as well. And it will be all of her backstory and her trauma and her dealing with everything that happened with her sister and with Mark. So super keen to read the next one. I would have rated this book 4, I think, but the last sort of 30% just threw me. I didn't expect it. I was hooked. So I think I'll go a 5 or a very strong 4.5. I can't quite decide. Totally recommend it. Was great. Loved it. Can't wait for the next one. Besties, what a ride. Taming 7 absolutely put us through the emotional ringer, but honestly, we loved every second of it.
Chloe Walsh really said, here's some trauma, here's some healing, here's some more trauma, good luck. And we just took it all in our stride.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We hope you screamed, cried, and laughed right along with us.
And tell us in the comments, what was the moment in Taming 7 that completely destroyed you? We love hearing your chaotic thoughts.
Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss our next deep dive and, of course, the upcoming vlogs for the rest of Boys of Tommen journey.
All right, besties, as always, happy reading, and we will see you in the next episode.
Bye.